Hey everyone, welcome back to the TILTEDU channel. So in the past few videos, we covered the basics of modeling inside of Blender, bringing that model inside of your Unity game engine. Now we'll be stepping into the part of coding. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now before we get into the coding part of this session, there are a few base concepts that we need to wrap our head around. And one of these concepts is known as the mono behavior. So what exactly is this mono behavior? Well, the mono behavior is a base class that provides us with a set of methods and properties that we can implement into our game environment. The mono behavior provides us with a bunch of useful components like this, as you can see on screen. Instead of just showing you these methods, I'll explain them one by one and the execution cycle of each of these methods. Awake function. References between script and initialization. On enable. Executes when the referenced game object becomes active in the hierarchy. Start. Called once at the beginning of the game before the first frame is rendered. Fixed update. Called at a fixed interval typically used for physics calculation. Update. Called once per frame typically used to update game logic and respond to player input. Late update. Called once per frame after all the other update methods have been called. On disable. Executes when the reference game object is disabled in the hierarchy. On destroy. Called when a scene or a game ends. Instead of just showing you these methods, I'll explain them one by one and the execution cycle of each of these methods. So let's dive into that. Since we just covered the fundamentals of coding, let's create our very own first script inside of Unity. Let's see how that works. Now to create a script, all you need to do is go into your project window, right click, go into create, and click this C# script button. And you can see it has automatically created a new behavior script. I've changed the name to test. So all you need to open your script inside of Unity is to double click it. And if you already installed Visual Studio while installing the Unity editor, it should open up right here. Now, before we get started with our coding, there is a ritual that everybody does before they start their coding journey is to print a hello world output. So let's do that. All you need to do is go into start void and type in print, open up two brackets and type in hello world and a semicolon and make sure you save the script. And after you save the script, make sure you go back into Unity, go into hierarchy and right click and create a 3D object. I'm going to create a cube. And make sure you attach this script onto the cube. It is just as simple as dragging it on to the component section. You can just drag it over here. And if I press play, you can actually go into the console and you can see the hello world message pop up. So we have written our first line of code inside of Unity. Now let's move on to actually moving this cube inside of this 3D scene. Now, how can we move this cube inside of the 3D scene? Now, to move an object inside of Unity, you need to access the transform component of that said object. Now, how can we reference this transform component inside of the script and move this cube? So let's see how we do that. Open up your script, go into your update function, and we're going to reference this transform component by calling it transform. And to move this object incrementally, we'll be using the translate data instead of the positional data. So type in dot translate. And since we want the object to move in a specific direction, we can just add a value to that set direction. So we have XYZ directions. I want this cube to move in the X direction. So I'm going to give it 1 in the X direction. And for the rest of the direction, I'm going to give it a value of 0. And to close everything off, add a semicolon and make sure you save this script. After you've done that, wait for a few seconds. And if you press play, you can actually see the cube takes off in the X direction. You can see it's, if you select the cube, if you come into the components, you can actually see it is updating this value right here every frame. Since we use the update function, every single frame that is being updated. Now, what if I wanted to change after a certain amount of time? I don't want it to update every frame. I want it to update, say, like after 1 second, maybe 2 seconds. Now, to do that, we can use another function known as time.delta time. So if we go back into our script, and I'm going to multiply it with time.delta time. And I'm going to hit save. If I go back into my scene, see where the cube is, zoom out a little bit and press play, you can actually see it is much slower when compared to our earlier one. And if we select the cube, you can see it is increasing every other second rather than every other frame. Now, what if I want to move my object by pressing a specific button? Say I want to make it move when I press the up arrow or when I press W. Now that is where you need to access your input. So when I press this W button, that is a specific input, and Unity needs to get that input and give back information to Unity to execute a specific task, or maybe to move in that direction. So how can we define this input? Well, thanks to Unity, it has already predefined input system. You can access it by going into Edit, Project Settings, and Input Manager. You can see everything is predefined. If you want to move it horizontally, the negative button is A and D, just like that. For the vertical, it is S and W. So everything is predefined by Unity. Now all we need to do is define this input system. Now if we go back into our script, the very same one, what I'm going to do is delete this one and type in input.getAccess, and I want to make sure I get the horizontal axis here. So I'm going to open up a pair of brackets and type in horizontal. And I also want it to move vertically. So what I can do is just copy this whole section right here, Control C, and just replace this 0 value on the Z axis so that we can move forward and backward as well. But in the Z axis, I want to change it to vertical. So make sure you save your script after doing so. And if you go back to the scene and play the scene, you can see I've got an error right here. That is because I feel like I've misspelled horizontal. Yeah, as you can see, I've misspelled horizontal. So make sure you spell vertical and horizontal correctly and save it once again. If I play it back right now, okay, we are not getting an error. And if I press W, you can see it is moving forward. If I press D, it is moving towards the right. If I press A, it is moving towards the left. And if I press S, it is moving towards the back. So we have basically have navigation set up inside of our game. And it also works for the arrow keys. You press your arrow keys, it should also work for that. So that was just a basic introduction when it comes to coding inside of Unity. In the upcoming sessions, we'll dive much more deeper into setting up our player controllers, as well as our platforms, and much more in the upcoming sessions. So if you like what you see, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and make sure you share this video with your friends who are interested in game development as well as 3D art creation. And make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell notification to get notified when we post a new video. Until then,